This is Spoken Sins, where if you give us 15 minutes, we'll show you a creator's soul. I am Mr. Anderson, the voice of Written Sins, and today with us we have
John Dover, the writer and creator of Johnny Scotch.
Now, Johnny Scotch is a fantastic comic book. I actually spent some of today reading it because you let me have the PDFs getting ready for this interview. But just go over it for the people who haven't had the opportunity to read it and are going to be fans. What exactly is Johnny Scotch about?
Johnny Scotch is basically my love letter to everything pulpy and noir and jazz that's good about the entertainment world. So I started writing the series about 3 years ago, just coming up with the character and finding ways for it to be fun and interesting, and really just trying to pay homage to, the writing masters like Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler, and then tap into my love of the cinematic noir universe as well, and then just toss it all together, and partnered with a wonderful artist. And right now we have 2 issues, Johnny Scotch #1 and Johnny Scotch #2, that are out and available for people to purchase, that we've been pitching at cons for the past couple years, and it's just been one heck of a ride.
Now, I noticed that you teamed up with Wannabe Press, and it was mentioned that it's because they do unique tales. Could you tell us a little bit about that partnership?
With Wannabe, I've kind of worked with Russell a little bit over the past couple of years, just helping promote projects that he's gotten behind, and him vice versa. He helps promote stuff that we've gotten behind. We were gonna be part of his monster anthology that he just put out, but that particular one partnership didn't quite pan out the way we wanted. But he put together a beautiful book, and I helped promo the heck out of it while they were doing an awesome Kickstarter the last couple months.
Yeah, Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I think he's extremely creative and doing tons of great stuff. So we hopefully will have a chance to work together on a more serious project in the future, I hope.
Now, speaking of who you work with, we noticed that you work with Thomas Barber. He actually did the storyboards in NBC's Grimm.
Thomas is my music collaborator. The storyboards for Grimm are done by my artist, Dan Schaefer.
Okay.
Yeah, Dan had worked on every season of Grimm. He started with them at the beginning, and they just finished out their run with NBC. He's also done work on Leverage. He does work on The Librarians on TNT. He does a ton of commercial work, and then, of course, the Johnny Scotch illustrations. He has been the mastermind behind the visual presentation of Johnny.
Now, I've got to admit, the art in that project is both unique and stunning. Was that a combination of you working with him, or was that your idea from the beginning? How did that kind of storytelling come to be visually?
Sure. That came to be through our partnership. I had been writing a couple of stories for Johnny Scotch for a little while, and really felt that it needed a visual platform. So I got in contact to Dan through a mutual friend of ours, and I sent him over some samples of what I was working on, because Dan, in the beginning of his career, was very heavily into the comic book industry. So I knew that even if he didn't get on board with the project, he would have some ideas as to who I could work with to get my project off the ground. When he started reading what I was doing, it really played to a sensibility that he liked. He liked the storytelling, he liked the characters. So instead of passing me off to someone else, he opted to take on the project himself. So the visual storytelling has come from our mutual love of film noir and adventure stories on TV. So, and his experience in the TV industry as a storyboard artist really helps to give everything a beautiful kinetic feel to it.
Well, that's fantastic. And I know that you had mentioned that music has heavily inspired both this and yourself. Could you go into music with us? I know it has a personal place for you.
It does. I've been a professional musician majority of my life. I've been a professional trumpet player for the past 20, 25 years. Educator. I still perform. So when I'm not writing, I'm usually either on the road with rock bands or with the Salem Symphony, or I'm teaching. And right there you can see I've got my own album out, which I also collaborate with Thomas Barber, who's helped me put together an entire musical side of the Johnny Scotch world as well, so that we would have just an extra layer of storytelling to expose people to when we go and do promotional events.
Now that's a fantastic idea. The question has to be asked, do you sit around and make the music first and write the comic, or do you write the comic and then make the music? How does that work?
Sure. All of that storytelling, I start with all the written stuff, all the writing of the character and the storylines. And then I sit down with Thomas, who's my musical collaborator on the project, and I tell him what I'm looking for. I'll give him like a reading, like a short excerpt, either describing a character or a scene, and he then will go off and create the musical landscape that emulates what I have written, so that when we're performing it live, I'm doing a reading that we're also reacting with live music and improvised music along with.
That's great. I mean, that's something that you don't normally hear about. Have you taken the comic book on tour with you? Is that something that you offer when you're out at these events?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Usually what we'll do is, if I'm doing a Johnny Scotch show, the book is always there as a prop for people to see, but it's also there for sale. We've done quite a few small house concerts where I do special invites for people to come out and hear the special music and see the artwork. And we also have even been able to take this right now. One Comic-Con has bought into it and allowed us to actually do a Johnny Scotch vignettes performance, where we got on stage and we did a performance of a few of the pieces that we do. And the whole thing just, I think it helps bring the audience even further into the pulpy noir world we're trying to create.
Which Comic-Con was that they allowed you to do that?
That one was here in Portland. It was NewCon PDX, and which is actually, it's more of an anime Comic-Con, but they have a lot of musical guests throughout the weekend and such. And we pitched them on what we were trying to do, and we continue to pitch the Comic-Cons on the idea of letting us bring the show into them, because I'm a huge fan of it, and I think that people would really dig it. Just a different way to digest the storytelling process.
Well, I mean, obviously music has a great deal of influence on this. Have you ever thought about actually making like a musical book where they actually shows the music that could be played interlaced with the comic book?
Oh, see, now you're jumping ahead. We actually have, we do have plans. They are a little ways out to incorporate some digital elements into a final larger Johnny Scotch graphic novel that will, as people go through the story, they'll have an opportunity to hear some of the musical landscape that goes along with the specific pictures as they're sitting there.
Well, that's awesome. That's something to look forward to. Speaking of looking forward to things, can you tell us what's next? I know issue 1 and 2 are out and available for purchase. Where can people buy that, and when is the next issue coming out? How will we be able to get that?
The next issue will, let me see, it's actually in Dan's hands right now. He's been working furiously on the artwork for it. So it's in the middle to late stages of being done with the art phase. We're trying to have it out in time for the Salt Lake Comic-Con, which we'll be a part of in September. Mostly due to his busy schedule, we try to only force one book out of him a year. So it's a little bit of a slow process, and I always apologize to my readers for that, but it's always well worth it. So we will have that. We also carry the book at quite a few local vendors, as well as like Destiny Comics up in Tacoma, We even have a comic vendor in Salt Lake, a comic vendor in Florida, quite a few here in Portland, because that's where we're both based out of. And every time I go out of town, I just work on trying to build that retail partnership with any local comic book stores where I go. And people can also order it online from me, order it directly from me, or even get issue #1 through Comixology if they like the digital package.
Now, you'd mentioned the fact that you go to Comic Cons quite often. Is that a big part of your year where you're going touring, or would you say that you promote Johnny Scotch more through your music?
Right now, I probably promote it a little bit more through the music, but we've been steadily increasing the amount of Comic Cons we go to as we have more of the books to actually put in people's hands. So like our first year that we did it, we only went to Salt Lake. The next year we did about 3. Last year, I think we did 6 cons, and we're probably on track to do 6 or 8 this year as well.
Now, with the upcoming issues, are you ever going to go to Kickstarter, or do you just go straight to selling it? Is that something that you've ever thought about doing?
Oh yeah, issue #2 we did do a Kickstarter on, which was successful. We got that out last year. Issue #3, I am planning on doing just a pre-order Kickstarter. So since the book is already going to be pretty much ready to go, I just want to use Kickstarter as a promotional platform and try and get some new readers as well as my current readers on board for getting some pre-ordered copies out there. So we'll set a smaller goal for that one, just for promotional purposes, and then and probably again in the future for other ones, but I don't utilize it as my main platform for promotion.
Now, it's an interesting idea, the way that you're going to be treating Kickstarter. Do you find that feedback is better or worse with your current projects, the way you're going? Do you think the Kickstarter could help, like, possibly grow the market, or do you find like going to the shows is a way to make the new fans, so to say?
I think that since it's a physical medium, it's always best to be in front of people. You know, so I like doing the cons, I like doing signings, and I like doing the musical shows because that allows me to have a much stronger connection to people. The Kickstarter world is a nice platform. It's not one that I mean, I know a lot of people have tons of success rolling through it. I've done fine with it, and I've always hit my goals. But I prefer to be in front of somebody and hand them a copy myself. It allows me that opportunity to just be face to face with who's reading. And what I've found is, especially with cons, because of that, I do have people coming back to my table specifically each year asking for what I've got new and looking for what we're doing in the future.
Now, can you give us a teaser for what we will be seeing in issue 3? For those who haven't seen the story so far, it might not make sense, but for your fans, I'm sure they'd love to get a teaser.
Sure. You know, with issue 1, we had Johnny in a bad place, meeting our female love interest, Lila. Issue 2, we get a little bit of intrigue and a bit of a murder mystery that built. And in issue 3, we start to see just how that relationship with Lila is not quite what Johnny thought, and definitely not what he wanted. And we also get a little bit of backstory as to why Johnny was in such a bad place when we met him in issue 1. So it's more of a character building episode. You get to see a lot more of why Johnny is the way he is, why Lila is the way she is, and where we're going to go in issue 4, which will be a very exciting roller coaster.
I'll tell you what, I read both issues today, as I mentioned earlier, and it is a great story. The art is stunning. It's one of those projects that is begging to be made a movie.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And with your music, you're definitely a creator on the rise.
Yeah, well, thank you.
You're welcome. And speaking of that rise, there's something else on the horizon for you, isn't there? Absolutely.
I was very excited. I spent some time this last year kind of experimenting as a writer, playing around with something a little out of my wheelhouse, which was the horror genre. So I put together a story, and I contacted a friend of mine, who Chuck Anderson, who runs Alley Card Press, and I asked him if if he had any thoughts on where I could go with something like this, and he immediately said, "I have a great place. I'll put out an anthology." So I'm partnering with Alucard Press this year on a horror anthology, kind of based on a world that I helped to create, which I'm doing 2 of the stories for. So people will be able to pick up Tales from the Braided Pony sometime this summer, as soon as we finish getting all the submissions in.
Now, how has that been working with a new artist? Because I know you're very used to working with your one artist on Johnny Scotch. How is it suddenly working with newer artists? Have you found it to be different in any way?
Well, this is definitely different because we're not working in the comic book world. This is strictly prose. It's the only art's going to be on the cover. So this is me getting to express myself strictly as a writer, and collaborating with other writers at the same time. So lots of fun.
All right, and we have to ask this before we run out of time. You make Johnny Scotch. So what's your favorite Scotch?
My favorite, depending on the time, but usually if I have the option, I will always gravitate towards a beautifully buttery, smoky Lagavulin, 16 to 18-year-old Lagavulin.
Nice. Well, sir, thank you for taking the time out with us today. We're excited to see what's next. You obviously have a full plate ahead of you. Will you be coming to any cons in the near future where some people who are watching this might be attending? Somewhere maybe in Florida or on the East Coast?
Oh, the East Coast, I would love to figure out a way to get out to the East Coast. We have not dipped our toe into that market quite yet. Probably the closest will be, we'll be going to Salt Lake again in the fall. And if I can work out scheduling and travel, then I would love to come out to the East Coast at some point.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. And I'm not going to hold you up anymore because I want to see issue 3. I want you to get behind the work and get that out to me, because I got to know what happens, because now the mystery's really got me hooked. I want to thank our guests tonight for being part of this, and all the links will be at the bottom of the video when we post it on writtensins.com. Any words for the fans?
Drink responsibly, write often, and have a good time.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Robert.